Hi Dr. Smith. I did my video critique on Burned on the Ground, a memoir by Canby Cruz. And this book is about her life as a coda. So she was born to two deaf parents and she has one older hearing sibling. So this book starts off with her visiting her father in prison. Here in prison, she doesn't have the flashbacks there, but she kind of flashes back to her life, her early life. And it starts off with them living in Houston. In Houston, they don't really get past the first chapter with her living in Houston because then she moves to Boar's Head to start over. Here in Boar's Head, her father builds them a trailer. And they live there until she's in high school. When she's in high school, they move to Fort Worth. Here in Fort Worth, her mom got a better job offer, and also they had been evicted from Boar's Head, so there was really no way of staying there. Here in Fort Worth is kind of where everything started to fall apart. Her brother, David, he got into drugs, and he was everywhere except home. So he was just not really in the picture. But her mother and her father, they were really going down a wrong path because her father had become an alcoholic. So he began abusing her mother. So Cambry and her mother moved away. And they still lived in Fort Worth, they just weren't living with her father. And in Fort Worth, she falls in love with a Navy SEAL. So they move to Ohio when she gets married at the age of 18. Here they lived for 6 years, the same amount of time that they were married. Once they get divorced, she moves to New York. Here in New York, she kind of makes a new life for herself. She kind of wants to get away from those roots that she came from. You know, all the violence and her life as a coda. Well, obviously she's not going to change that. She's always going to be coda, but kind of, start her own life and a new beginning. But she gets a call from her brother that her father has stabbed his new girlfriend. So from then on, her and her father kind of have this rocky relationship. But I think that the point of having the flashbacks while she's visiting her father in prison is to show that back then they had a bad relationship. But now, at the age of 40, she is finally okay with her father and she loves him no matter the kind of person that he is. He's always going to be her father. So I think that this story isn't just about her life and her experiences with her family, but it's also the experiences of other coda, because she does talk about having to translate for them. She has talked about having to accommodate her lifestyle because of her parents' deafness, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but she does explain how things are different because her parents cannot hear. So I think that her intended audience is coda, and maybe not the younger children, but older coda, because the language that she uses is very vulgar at some points, and she also uses profanity because she doesn't keep anything a secret. She kind of just, writes it all out there. That's what kind of had me a little iffy about this book, because it was so much to take in. But it is a good book overall. And not only will it help with the life of coda, but it will also give an insight to deaf teachers or SLPs to kind of see deep inside the life of a deaf child. Because not only with her and her brother, who weren't deaf, but, having deaf parents, her deaf parents at some point were deaf children. So when you kind of read how her parents were brought up differently and how their reactions are differently in their lives. For example, her mother was raised in a deaf family, so they knew ASL. She was taken to a deaf school, and to her, the minority was hearing, not deaf. So in the book, you can tell that her mother was more carefree about being deaf, unlike her father. Her father was one of two children who, in his family, who were deaf. So they didn't really learn sign language. They were more home signs that they just made up. And he did go to a deaf school, But to him, it wasn't the same experience as her mother did. So growing up and, as an adult, you could kind of tell that he just took it in differently, negatively. So I feel like deaf teachers or teachers of the deaf and SLPs can kind of use this book to know that the different ways and the different things that kind of play into a family with a deaf loved one. So overall, I enjoyed reading this book. It was a really good book to read. Of course, some parts for me personally were boring, but I would still recommend this book. It is a good book to read, and it kind of just, it's crazy. Her life is crazy, but it's just something that it's a really good book. So I would recommend someone to read it, and hopefully they get a lot out of it just as I did.